The air in the tertiary energy core of Orbis 9 station was always thick. It was thick with the smell of ozone and hot metal. It was thick with the low, endless hum of power flowing through crystalline conduits. And for Yuna, it was thick with a loneliness so deep it felt colder than the vacuum outside the station's hull. Her gray scales, the color of dull ash, absorbed the harsh blue light of the core chamber instead of reflecting it. She moved quietly between the humming control panels, her small frame dwarfed by the machinery. Her job was simple: monitor the output levels and report any anomalies. It was a job given to her not because of skill, but because no one else wanted to be near the null scale. On her homeworld, Draconis Prime, her birth had been a quiet disgrace, where her siblings had hatched with scales of gleaming crimson and emerald, with sparks of fire already in their throats. She had emerged small, gray, and silent. No inner fire, no impressive size, just a faint, erratic shimmer along her neck and hands that glowed weakly when she was sad or scared, which was often. Her family, noble and proud, had sent her to the frontier station of Orbis 9. Out of sight, a maintenance contract for a maintenance daughter. For 3 cycles, she had lived in a small, bare room and worked in the core. The other species, the tall barabels, the insectoid KTH, the sleek Felidae, mostly ignored her. To them, she was just another worker. To the few Draconis who passed through on diplomatic missions, she was a ghost they refused to see. She had made her world very small just to survive it. But today, the machinery was not cooperating. For a week, the power flow from tertiary core gamma had been unstable. Flickers, tiny, unpredictable drops in output that made the station lights dip for a fraction of a second. The chief engineers, a team of brilliant Taurans, had scanned every conduit and crystal. They found nothing wrong with the hardware. The manager of the sector, a broad-shouldered barable named Quan, was furious. Lost power was lost money. He stood now in the core chamber, his reptilian tail lashing against the deck plating. Yuna tried to make herself even smaller beside a primary console. "It is happening again," Quan snarled, pointing a clawed finger at the readout. The numbers danced erratically. "And it is happening on your shift, Dragonid. Every time." Yuna flinched. I do not touch anything, Manager Quan. I only watch the screens." "Do not play foolish with me," he boomed, stepping closer. His shadow fell over her. "Your kind are beings of energy, of magic. This," he gestured wildly at the flickering lights, "this is an energy problem, and you are a broken energy being. A null. Your very presence here is corrupting my core." Tears, hot and shameful, pricked at the corners of Yuna's eyes. She willed them not to fall. Her neck scales flickered with a pale, blue light for a moment before fading. This only seemed to prove Quan's point. "See," he hissed, "even your broken light reacts to the problem. I have spoken to the station overseer. We have a new drift technician coming. A human. They are good with oddities. If he cannot find a mechanical cause, then the cause is you, and you will be removed. Your contract will be terminated, and you will be transferred to the debtors' colony on -2. The words hit Yuna like physical blows. -2 was a rumor of endless labor and crushing rock. A place where things were forgotten. It was not just a job loss. It was an end, a final erasure. Just then, the main hatch to the core chamber slid open with a quiet hiss. A man walked in. He was not tall like a barable or imposing like a Tauran. He was of average height, with dark hair and a calm, observant face. He wore simple, durable coveralls with many pockets. A toolbox was in his hand. This was the human. He glanced at Quan, then at the crying dragon girl trying to vanish into the console, then at the flicking power readouts. His expression did not change to anger, or pity, or even much curiosity. It was simply attentive. "You are the technician?" Quan said, turning his frustration on the new arrival. Sumin, the man Sumin, nodded. "Yes, I was asked to look at the fluctuation." "Good. Find it. It is not in the schematics. Maybe your people's knack for broken things will see what proper engineers cannot." Quan shot a final glare at Yuna. She is the operator. Do not let her near the sensitive parts. The problem may be contagious. With that, Quan stormed out, leaving Su-min and Yuna alone in the humming, flickering room. Yuna braced herself for more questions, for suspicion, for the cold, clinical examination she had received from others. Su-min said nothing to her at first. He set his toolbox down with a soft clink and looked up at the network of glowing conduits above them. He watched the light pulse, his eyes following its path. He then looked at the main console, his gaze resting on the erratic numbers. After a long moment, he turned his head slightly toward Yuna. She was still pressed against the console, her arms wrapped around herself. His eyes were brown and warm, and they held no malice. He didn't smile, but he gave a single, small, neutral nod. It wasn't friendly, but it wasn't hostile. It was an acknowledgement. I see you are there. Then, he turned back to the conduits, pulled a multiscanner from his belt, and got to work. The only sounds were the hum of the core, the soft beep of his scanner, and the quiet, shaky breath of a dragon girl who had just been told her life was over, standing in the presence of a silent human who had not yet judged her. Su-min worked in silence. The only sounds were the precise clicks of his tools, the low hum of his scanner, and the steady, if slightly ragged, breathing of the dragon girl from the corner. Yuna watched him, her initial fear slowly mixing with a painful curiosity. He did not look at her again. His entire focus was on the machinery. He started with the primary conduits, the large crystalline pipes that glowed with blue energy. He ran his scanner along their lengths, his eyes on the small screen. He checked the connection nodes, tapping them lightly with an insulated tool. He moved with a quiet confidence that was different from the proud, flashy engineers she had seen before. They declared things fixed. Su-min seemed to be listening to the problem. Yuna finally remembered her job. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, her dull scales scraping softly. She turned to her monitor, her fingers trembling as she called up the standard diagnostic suite. The main flow is unstable between junction 7 and 9, she said, her voice hoarse from crying. The Taurans replaced the crystal relays there last week. It did not help. Su-min paused and looked at the junction she mentioned. He gave another small nod. Thank you, he said. His voice was calm and even. He walked over to junction 7 and began his examination again. His simple thanks shocked her. It was a professional courtesy, something she had not received in a long time. She was either ignored or blamed. She watched him more closely. He opened an access panel, peering inside at the complex lattice of wires and faintly glowing stones. He didn't just scan it. He looked, his head tilted, as if trying to hear a secret. After nearly an hour, he sat back on his heels. He pulled a small device from his ear, a personal comms link, and activated it. I am in tertiary core gamma, the one with the flicker. A cheerful, staticky voice replied. Ah, the ghost in the machine. Find the gremlin yet? Not yet. No foreign material. No crystal fatigue. No energy leaks on standard bands. Connections are all solid. Maybe it's haunted. Jay's voice laughed. You know, a sad station spirit. Did the Barable manager blame the little dragon? Su-min's eyes flicked to Yuna for just a second. She looked away quickly, her face growing warm with shame. He had heard everything. Something like that, Su-min said quietly into the comm. I will run a full-spectrum resonance scan. Send me the protocol for crystalline emotional feedback. Emotional feedback? Su-min, that's a myth. That's for old story tapes. Just send it, Jay. There was a sigh and a beep from Su-min's wristpad. Sent. Good luck talking to a ghost. Su-min ended the call. He downloaded the protocol and reconfigured his scanner. This new scan emitted a soft, pulsing light that washed over the crystals. He began again, moving slowly from junction to junction. Yuna's heart sank. Emotional resonance. It was a theoretical idea that strong feelings could affect certain sensitive crystals. It was a joke among engineers, and he was looking for it here. He was looking for her influence. The small hope his earlier thanks had kindled sputtered and died. He was just like the others, only quieter. He was going to prove she was the contaminant. She turned her back to him, pretending to check other readouts. Her vision blurred again. She felt the familiar, awful pressure in her chest, the heavy weight of being wrong, of being broken. As the sadness swelled, the faint bioluminescent markings along her neck and wrists flickered weakly, casting a pathetic blue glow on her console at that exact moment. Behind her, Suman's scanner let out a sharp ping. He was over by Junction 5, far from where she stood. He looked at the scanner, then at the power output graph on the main screen. The instability had just spiked. A jagged line appeared on the graph. He looked at Yuna's back, at the faint, sad glow on the wall beside her. He said nothing. He simply noted it. He waited. A few minutes later, a group of senior Draconis ambassadors, their scales polished bronze and deep jade, walked past the large observation window of the core chamber on a station tour. They did not look inside. They never did. Yuna caught a glimpse of them, their proud postures, their effortless majesty. A wave of crushing loneliness and longing washed over her, so intense it stole her breath. Her scales flickered brighter. Suman's scanner pinged again. A rapid series of beeps. On the main graph, the power line danced erratically. He moved. Not toward her, but to the main power regulator. He watched the real-time energy flow, then looked back at Yuna. She was hunched over, her arms wrapped tight around herself, a picture of misery. The glow from her scales pulsed in time with her shaky breaths. Suman's brow furrowed, not in anger, but in deep thought. He ran a new scan, this time focusing on the energy field around Yuna herself. The readings were strange, chaotic, and deep. It was not a null signature. It was like a turbulent, locked ocean of power, churning violently inside her with no way out, and its waves were sloshing against the sensitive crystals of the core. The glitch was not a mechanical fault. It was a sympathetic vibration. The core was singing out of tune because the silent, broken instrument next to it was humming a song of profound sorrow, and the crystals were resonating with it. Suman powered down his scanner. He did not go to Manager Quan. He did not announce his discovery. He simply packed his tools with the same methodical care he had used to unpack them. The diagnosis was complete. The cause was not a broken machine. It was a broken heart, and it was affecting the machine. He now had to decide what to do about it. He zipped his toolbox closed, the sound final in the humming room. Suman left the core chamber without a word. The heavy hatch closed behind him, leaving Yuna alone with the flickering lights and the crushing certainty of her fate. She slid down the wall to sit on the cold floor, drawing her knees to her chest. The human had seen it. He had his data. He would report to Manager Quan that the problem was her, the defective null scale. Her transfer to -2 was now just a matter of time. She rested her forehead on her knees. The faint, sad glow of her scales was the only light that felt like her own in the whole bright, humming room. Suman did not go to see Manager Quan. Instead, he walked through the busy corridors of Orbis 9, his face calm but his mind working. He went back to his small workshop in the drift sector, a cluttered space filled with half-fixed devices and strange parts. His friend Jay was there, tuning a plasma torch. "Well?" Jay asked, looking up. "Did you calm the station ghost?" "It's not a ghost," Suman said, placing his toolbox on a bench. He connected his scanner to a larger screen and pulled up the data. Jay came over and whistled as he saw the graphs. "Wild fluctuations. But see, no pattern. It's random." "It's not random," Suman said quietly. He pulled up two graphs side by side. One was the core's power output. The other was a low-level bioresonance scan. He pointed to a spike on the power graph. "Here." Manager Quan was yelling at the Dragonid operator. He pointed to another, larger spike. "And here." A group of her people walked by the viewing window. She saw them. Jay frowned, looking closer. The spikes aligned perfectly. "You're kidding. Emotional feedback? On this scale, that's not a glitch. That's a medical issue. Or a psychic one." "It's a resonance issue," Suman corrected. "The core crystals are hypersensitive to certain energy wavelengths. She's emitting one. A strong one. but it's all trapped inside. It's like a singer who can only scream into a locked box. The box shakes. That's what the core is feeling. The shake. Jay leaned against the bench, crossing his arms. Okay, so you tell Quan. He throws the poor girl out, they install some cheap resonance dampeners, problem solved. A sad story, but business is business. Sumin was silent for a long moment, looking at the image of the chaotic energy readings from Yuna. It was a storm of pain visible on a screen. That is one solution, he finally said. It's the only solution, Jay said, though his voice was less sure now. What else is there? You can't fix her. She's a dragonid. If her own people can't fix a null scale, what can you do? I'm not going to fix her, Sumin said. He switched off the screen. I am going to have lunch. Jay stared at him, confused. But Sumin was already moving to a small, clean corner of the workshop where he kept a hot plate and a few containers. He began heating something. Back in the core, Yuna's shift ended. The walk back to her hab unit was a blur of passing shapes and sounds that didn't touch her. Her room was in a cheap, quiet sector. It was a small cube with a bed platform, a small sanitation unit, and a viewport that showed nothing but the endless black of space and the distant glint of stars. It was cold and silent. She didn't bother with the lights. She sat on the floor in the dark corridor just outside her door. It was marginally less lonely than sitting inside the empty room. She pulled her thin worker's jacket tighter around her. She was so lost in her thoughts that she didn't hear the soft footsteps approaching. Sumin turned the corner, holding a small thermal bag. He saw her there, a small, huddled shape in the dim corridor light. He stopped for a moment, then walked forward slowly, making sure his steps were audible. Yuna looked up, startled. Her eyes widened when she saw him. She scrambled to stand up, fear flashing across her face. He had come to tell her. He had come with the formal notice from Quan. I can explain, she began, her voice trembling. Sumin shook his head. He didn't come closer. He just sat down on the floor of the corridor, a few meters away from her. He placed the thermal bag between them. He didn't look at her with pity or with professional detachment. He looked at the wall opposite, giving her space. My shift is over too, he said, his voice calm in the quiet hall. The food in the commissary is bad today. Yuna just stared, confused. Was this a human trick? A strange prelude to bad news? Sumin opened the bag and took out a thermos. He unscrewed the lid. A rich, savory smell immediately filled the corridor. Spicy, salty, with the scent of the sea. It was completely unlike the bland nutrient paste of the station. He poured some into the lid cup and took a slow sip. Then he took out a second thermos and a simple metal cup. He poured a steaming, amber liquid from the second thermos into the cup. A sweet, comforting smell of roasted grain joined the first. He pushed the cup of hot barley tea and the first thermos of soup gently across the floor toward her. They stopped halfway between them. An offering, not a demand. It's just seafood noodle soup, he said. My mother's recipe. And barley tea. It's good when it's cold. He then went back to drinking his own soup, looking straight ahead, as if sharing a meal on a corridor floor was the most normal thing in the universe. Yuna looked at the steaming cup, then at the thermos, then at Sumin. He wasn't looking at her. He wasn't waiting for her to perform. He had simply shared. The simple, profound act of sharing food broke a dam inside her that years of loneliness had built. A tear escaped, tracing a path down her scaled cheek. Then another. She reached out a trembling hand and picked up the warm cup. The heat seeped into her cold fingers. She took a small, hesitant sip. The warmth spread through her, a physical comfort she had forgotten. She didn't eat the soup yet. She just held the cup with both hands, crying silently, while the human sat beside her in the quiet hall, drinking his soup and saying nothing at all. The silence in the corridor was not empty. It was filled with the quiet sounds of drinking, of soft breathing, and the slow, steady release of tears that did not need to be hidden. Yuna held the warm cup between her hands, the heat a solid, real thing in the cold void of her life. She took another sip of the barley tea. It was sweet and clean, washing away the metallic taste of fear. Sumin finished his soup and put the thermos lid back on. He sat quietly, his hands resting in his lap. He didn't push her to talk. He didn't ask questions. He just waited, a patient and steady presence in the dim light. Finally, Yuna's quiet crying subsided into shaky breaths. The simple kindness, the act of sharing food without expecting anything, had disarmed her completely. She looked at the thermos of soup he had pushed toward her. She carefully poured a little into the now empty cup. The smell was rich and complex. She took a small sip. The flavors were strong and wonderful, unlike anything she had ever tasted. It felt like nourishment for something deeper than her body. "It is very good," she whispered, her voice rough. "Thank you." Sumin nodded slightly. "It is better with company," he said simply. Those words opened the floodgates. Not of tears this time, but of words. They spilled out of her, quiet and broken at first, then gaining strength as she spoke into the safe, listening silence he provided. "On my homeworld," she began, staring into her cup. "Light is everything. Bright scales. Fire breath that can be seen from space. Magic that shapes stone. I was born gray and dark." She held up a hand, and with a small effort, she made the faint markings on her wrist flicker. "The light was weak and blue. This is all I have. It does nothing. It is just a flaw, a failure." She told him about the hushed disappointment of her noble family. The way her siblings, magnificent and powerful, didn't know how to speak to her. The final, polite suggestion that she might find a quiet purpose off-world. The contract on Orbis 9, which was really just a way to send her away. "Here, I am invisible," she said, her voice growing small again. "Or I am a problem. The others feel my wrongness. Manager Quan is right. I am a contaminant. I break things just by being near them. The core. It hates me too." Sumin listened. He didn't interrupt. He didn't offer empty comfort like, "It will be okay," or "You are special in your own way." He just absorbed her story, his face serious and thoughtful. When she finished, the corridor was quiet again. She felt drained, but strangely lighter, as if a physical weight had been lifted from her chest and left in the space between them. Sumin spoke after a long pause. His voice was low and even. "The core does not hate you," he said. Yuna looked up, surprised. "It is a machine. It has crystals. They react to energy. Your energy is—" He searched for the right word. "Loud and sad. It is like a very heavy song that only the crystals can hear. It makes them vibrate wrong. That is the flicker." Hearing it stated so plainly as a technical fact and not a moral failing was shocking to Yuna. "So, I am the cause. You are the source of the resonance," Sumin corrected, his tone neutral. "A loud noise can break a glass. That does not mean the noise is evil. It means it is powerful, and the glass is in the wrong place." She shook her head, not understanding. "But it is the same. I am the noise. I must be removed." Sumin didn't answer that directly. Instead, he asked a quiet question. "This light you make, when you feel sad, can you make it brighter?" Yuna flinched. I try not to. It is shameful. It shows everyone I am weak. Could you try? Now?" She looked around the empty corridor, terrified. But he had shared his food. He had listened. He had not told her she was a monster. She owed him this strange request. She closed her eyes, thinking of all the loneliness, the fear of -2, the cold faces of her family. The deep, familiar sorrow welled up. The markings along her neck and hands glowed brighter, casting a soft, sad blue light on the walls around them. It was the brightest she had ever let it shine. Sumin watched, not her face, but the light on the wall. He watched it pulse faintly with her heartbeat. "It is not weak," he said finally, his voice firm. "It is a signal, a very strong one. Your people use fire and magic as signals of power. This is your signal. It is just tuned to a different feeling." He stood up, collecting his thermoses. Yuna's light faded quickly as she opened her eyes, feeling exposed and vulnerable. You should finish the soup, he said. I will see you at the core tomorrow. There is more work to do. He gave her one last, brief nod, the same as when he first saw her, and then walked away down the corridor, his footsteps fading into silence. Yuna was left alone, but the emptiness felt different. Her secret was out. The human knew everything, and he had not run to Quan. He had called her inner light a signal. He had called it strong. She picked up the thermos and poured more soup, her hands steadier now. As she ate the warm, spicy food, she replayed his words in her head. A very heavy song, powerful, a signal. For the first time in her life, someone had described her not as a lack of something, but as a presence of something else. It was confusing and frightening. But as she sat in the corridor, the warmth of the soup inside her and the ghost of his quiet company around her, a tiny, fragile spark of something unfamiliar flickered in her chest. That it was not hope. Not yet. It was the simple, staggering realization that she might not be entirely alone. The next day, the core chamber hummed with its usual relentless energy. Yuna stood at her console, the memory of the soup and the quiet conversation in the corridor sitting in her mind like a small, warm stone. She watched the door, a knot of anxiety tightening in her stomach. Would he come? Would he come with Manager Quan and station security? The hatch slid open. Only Sumin entered, carrying his toolbox. He gave her the same small, neutral nod as before. Manager Quan was not with him. Good morning, Sumin said, his voice even. Gee, good morning, Yuna managed to reply. Her scales gave a faint, nervous flicker. Sumin went straight to work, but it was different today. He wasn't just scanning the machinery. He set up a portable screen linked to the core's main systems. He pulled up the real-time energy graph, the one that showed the flickering instability. He then placed a small, disc-shaped sensor on the floor, not far from where Yuna stood. This will measure localized resonance, he explained, without looking at her. For my report. Yuna's heart sank. The report, of course. This was all just data collection for his final verdict. The warm stone in her mind turned cold. She nodded silently and turned back to her monitor, trying to be small and still and cause no new ripples. The morning passed slowly. Sumin worked quietly, making notes on his datapad. The core flickered occasionally, small dips in power that made the lights waver. Each time, Yuna flinched, waiting for him to point at her. To note the correlation, he never did. He just watched his screens, his expression unreadable. After several hours, Manager Quan's gruff voice crackled over the internal comm technician. My office. Now, I want a preliminary report. Sumin looked up. Understood. He switched off his portable screen and stood. He glanced at Yuna. Her back was rigid with tension. He didn't say anything to her. He just walked out, the hatch closing behind him with a heavy finality. This was it. He was telling Quan. He had all the proof he needed. The anomaly was her. Yuna's hands clenched on the edge of the console. The deep, cold loneliness rushed back in, stronger than ever, because now it had briefly tasted something else. The sadness was a physical ache, a crushing pressure in her chest. Her scales began to glow, a steady, mournful blue light that pulsed softly in the rhythm of her heartbreak. She was so absorbed in her despair that she didn't hear the hatch open again. Sumin had not gone to Quan's office. He had stepped out, sent a quick message delaying the meeting, and come back. He wanted to see the resonance at its strongest. Without an audience, he stood just inside the door, watching. He saw her hunched form. He saw the beautiful, sad light emanating from her, brighter than he had ever seen it. On the main power graph, the line was no longer flickering. It was surging in wild, dramatic waves, a perfect mirror to the storm of grief inside her. His small sensor disc was blinking rapidly, recording the immense, turbulent energy field around her. Powerful, deep, and utterly trapped. He had his confirmation. The solution was simple on paper. Remove the resonance source. Install dampeners. The station's problem would be solved. But Sumin saw the problem differently now. He didn't see a faulty component. He saw a locked door, And humanity's peculiar talent was not for fixing broken things, but for opening locked doors no one else knew were there. He took a soft step forward. Yuna heard him and whirled around. Her eyes were wide with fear and shame, her face lit from below by her own glow. She tried to stop the light, to clamp down on it, but she couldn't. It was flowing out of her, a visible sign of her weakness. Sumin stopped a few paces away. He didn't look at the graphs proving her guilt. He looked only at her. Yuna trembled. All the stories she had half heard about humans flashed in her mind. They were social creatures. They valued connection. They touched each other freely, a concept both fascinating and terrifying to her reserved culture. In her desperation, in her absolute certainty that this was the end, a wild, impossible thought took root. It was a plea not for mercy, but for one single moment of the connection she had heard about. One moment of not being a problem, before she was thrown away. Her voice, when it came, was a broken whisper, barely audible over the hum of the core. Human, Sumin. He waited, his expression calm, open. She hugged her own arms tightly, as if trying to hold herself together. The words felt like they were tearing her throat open. Could you give me a hug, please? It was the most vulnerable thing she could have ever done. In her culture, to ask for physical comfort was to admit a catastrophic failure of spirit. It was to show you had no inner fire to warm yourself. It was the request of a child or a dying thing. She asked it anyway, bracing for his rejection, for his confusion, for the final proof of her isolation. Sumin did not hesitate. He did not smile sadly or look awkward. He simply opened his arms, a gesture that was both simple and immense. It was an unguarded, silent answer. A small, shocked sound escaped Yuna. She stumbled forward one step, then two, before her legs seemed to give way. She fell into the space his arms offered. He closed them around her. His hold was firm and solid, but not tight. It was steady. He was warm, so warm, a living anchor in the cold chaos of her world. He rested his chin lightly on the top of her head and just held her. No patting, no whispered platitudes, just a silent, complete embrace. And then he spoke, his voice a soft rumble in his chest that she could feel. He said it first in his own language, the words smooth and gentle. Then he repeated it in Galactic Common, right next her ear. It must have been so heavy, carrying all that alone. They were not words of pity. They were words of witness. He saw the weight. He acknowledged its reality. He did not say she was weak for feeling it. He stated that it was heavy. And in that moment, the locked door inside her burst open. A great, wrenching sob tore from Yuna's throat. Then another. She wasn't crying quietly anymore. She was weeping, her whole body shaking, years of loneliness, fear, and shame pouring out. And as she cried, the sad blue light from her scales began to change. It grew brighter, warmer, shifting from blue to a soft, glowing gold. It pulsed not with erratic grief, but with a steady, rhythmic flow of release. In the human's silent, steadfast embrace, the heavy song inside her finally found a harmony. On the main power graph behind them, the wild, surging lines smoothed out. The flickers vanished. The power flow settled into a deep, straight, perfectly stable line, humming with a quiet, unprecedented strength. The core was no longer resonating with a song of sorrow. It was resonating with a song of relief. The change in the core's hum was not subtle. The erratic, nervous vibration that had plagued it for weeks smoothed into a deep, contented purr. The lights in the chamber stopped their faint flickering and shone with a steady, unwavering glow. The main power graph on the console displayed a single, straight, optimal line. It was so perfect it looked like a textbook example. Yuna did not see it. Her world had shrunk to the solid warmth of Sumin's jacket, the firm anchor of his arms, and the torrent of tears that felt like they were cleansing a deep old wound. Her scales glowed with that warm, gold light, pulsing gently in time with her slowing sobs. Sumin did not hurry her. He held her until her cries softened into shaky breaths. He held her until she finally, slowly loosened her own grip. Then he gently let his arms drop, taking a small step back to give her space. His face was calm, as if holding a crying dragon girl was a normal part of his workday. Yuna wiped her face, embarrassed but feeling strangely light, as if she were floating. She looked at her hands. The golden light was fading, but it left her gray scales looking softer, less like ash and more like polished stone. I am sorry, she whispered, her voice thick. Do not be, Sumin said. He nodded toward the main console. Look, she turned. The perfect power line on the screen meant nothing to her at first. Then she understood. Stability. The flicker was gone. Her eyes went wide. Did you fix something? No, he said simply. He pointed to the small sensor disc on the floor, its light now a calm, steady green. The resonance changed. It is peaceful now. The core is happy. Before she could process this, the hatch to the chamber hissed open. Manager Quan stood there, his tail lashing impatiently. Technician, you ignore my call? I demand. He stopped short. His sharp eyes darted from Sumin to Yuna, whose face was still tear-streaked, then to the main power console. He saw the perfectly stable readout. His anger vanished, replaced by confusion. What is this? The fluctuation. It is gone. The system needed recalibration, Sumin said, his voice flat and professional. He walked over to his portable screen and called up false data streams he had prepared, graphs of imaginary crystal stress and fabricated alignment corrections. The emotional resonance from the operator was misaligned with the core's sensitivity. It was amplifying a minor fault. I have corrected the fault. The operator's resonance is now in harmony. She was part of the solution, not the problem. Quan blinked, looking from the convincing fake data to Yuna. He didn't understand the technical words, but he understood the results. The power was stable. His problem was solved. His credit balance would not suffer. Humph. Good. He looked at Yuna with a less hostile, but still dismissive gaze. So she is not a contaminant? She is a unique stabilizer, Sumin stated, using the bureaucratic language Quan loved. The core is now operating at 117% efficiency. I recommend her status be reviewed. Her natural resonance could be a valuable asset for tuning sensitive systems. Quan's eyes gleamed at the number. 117%. That was a bonus for him. He looked at Yuna as if seeing a piece of useful equipment for the first time. Very well. Dragonid, your contract is reprieved. Report to maintenance scheduling tomorrow for a new assignment. Resonance technician. We will see. With a final grunt, he turned and left, already thinking of his report. The hatch closed. Yuna stood frozen, trying to understand what had just happened. The threat was gone. The debtor's colony was gone. She had a new title. You lied for me? She said softly to Sumin. Sumin packed his sensor disc away. I did not lie. I gave a true conclusion with false details. You are a stabilizer. The core is stable. He looked at her, and for the first time, she saw a flicker of something like warmth in his eyes. He only understands numbers. Now he sees a useful number next to you. That is how you survive here. The meaning settled over her. He had not just fixed a machine. He had fixed her situation. He had taken her deepest shame, reframed it as a strength, and sold it to Quan in a language he understood. It was the most breathtaking act of kindness she had ever witnessed. Why? She asked, the word filled with awe and confusion. Why would you do this? Sumin slung his toolbox over his shoulder. He considered the question. On my world, he said slowly, we have a saying. A heavy shared is a heavy halved. You were carrying the whole weight. It was breaking the floor. He gestured to the core around them. And the floor was expensive station property. This was the most logical repair. He said it so plainly, so matter-of-factly, that Yuna almost laughed. It was a strange human logic that saw a crying outcast and thought, this is a structural integrity issue. But she understood the truth underneath. He had seen her pain not as a nuisance, but as a weight. And he had chosen to help her carry it, not because he had to, but because it was the logical thing to do. For a human. Thank you, she said, the words feeling too small for what he had done. Su-min gave his familiar, small nod. Finish your shift. The core is quiet. It is a good place to think. He walked to the hatch, then paused. The soup. Did you like it? The simple, ordinary question made her smile, a real, small smile. Yes, very much. Good, he said, and then he was gone. Yuna was alone again in the core chamber. But everything was different. The air did not feel thick with loneliness. It hummed with steady, peaceful power. She looked at her console at the perfect straight line. She looked at her hands, where the last traces of golden light were fading. She was still a nullscale. She was still gray. But for the first time, she did not feel broken. She felt recalibrated. And for the first time in her life, she felt a connection to another living being that did not hurt. Felt instead like a foundation. A week passed on Orbis 9 station. The tertiary energy core continued its new, perfect rhythm. The story of the human technician who fixed the unfixable glitch became a minor legend in the engineering pubs, told and retold. The part about the dragon girl was usually left out or mentioned only as a footnote, the operator who was present. But in the maintenance division, things changed for Yuna. Manager Kwan, motivated by the sustained 117% efficiency rating, made good on his word. Her title was officially changed to Resonance Technician, Auxiliary Grade. Her duties were vague, which was a gift. She was to monitor and assess energy stability in the core. In practice, it meant she had a quiet, authorized space to simply be. She spent her shifts there, learning the new sound of peace. The core no longer reacted to her sadness with flickers. It seemed to have learned the new, calmer song she carried inside. Her scales no longer glowed with that sad blue. Now, when she felt a quiet moment of focus, or remembered the warmth of the soup or the solid safety of the hug, they would emit a soft, silver shimmer, like moonlight on water. It was gentle and steady. She saw Su-min sometimes. He did not visit her in the core. That would have been strange. But their paths crossed in the station's bustling lower decks. In a supply corridor, outside a commissary, he would always give her that same small nod. Sometimes he would stop. Yuna, he would say, acknowledging her new name in his records. Su-min. She would reply, her voice growing steadier each time. Once, he handed her a small packet. Spice blend. For soup, if you get a hot plate. Another time, he simply said, Core is reading well. Good work. Then he would move on with his day. It was not a friendship in the way stories described. There were no long talks or adventures. It was something quieter. It was a mutual recognition. He saw her, and she saw him. A man who moved through the noisy, cold station with a quiet purpose, who fixed things by understanding them deeply. One evening, her shift over, Yuna did not go straight to her HAB unit corridor. She walked to the drift sector. She found the door marked with his name and a symbol for salvage. It was slightly open. She could hear the sound of soft music and tools clinking inside. She peered in. Su-min's workshop was a cozy chaos of machines and parts. He was at a bench using a delicate tool on the inner workings of a small, alien device. His friend Jay was there, tinkering with a drone. Jay saw her first and nudged Su-min. Su-min looked up. Yuna felt a flush of nervousness. I do not mean to interrupt. You are not, Su-min said. He did not smile, but his eyes were welcoming. He gestured to a small, clear spot on a bench. She stepped inside, the door sliding shut behind her. The room was warm and smelled of oil, solder, and something else. Something like the tea he had shared. It was a lived-in space. She sat quietly, watching them work. They talked about technical problems, about parts, about station gossip. They included her with a look or a simple question now and then. The core's baseline is holding? Jay asked. She nodded. Good. That's good. After a while, Su-min stood and went to the same corner with the hot plate. He prepared 3 cups of barley tea. He handed one to Jay, one to Yuna, and kept one for himself. They drank in comfortable silence. It was not the desperate, tearful silence of the corridor. It was a peaceful one. Yuna held the warm cup, the silver glow on her scales pulsing softly in time with her calm heartbeat. She was not a project to them. She was not a tragedy. She was just a person in the room, sharing tea. Later, as she left to return to her own quarters, Sumin walked her to the door. "The new assignment is acceptable?" he asked. "It is," she said. And it was. It was more than acceptable. It was a life. It was a future that was hers. She looked up at him, this quiet human who had seen a crack in the universe in the form of a lonely dragon girl and had chosen to bridge it with soup and a hug and a clever lie. "Thank you," she said again, because it was the only currency she had for a debt that could never be repaid. He shook his head slightly. "You did the work," he said, and she understood he didn't mean the core monitoring. He meant the crying, the trusting, the carrying of the weight until someone came to help share it. She walked back through the station. The corridors were the same. The sounds were the same. But she was different. She was not fixed because she had not been broken. She had been locked, and a human had shown her the key was not a roar of fire or a flash of magic, but a simple, open-hearted question and a willingness to listen to the answer. Sometimes, on hard days, the old loneliness would try to whisper back. On those days, she would go to the core, place her hand on the warm crystal of the main conduit, and feel its steady, harmonious hum, a hum that now matched her own. And sometimes, if the weight felt too heavy, she would go to the workshop in the drift sector. Sometimes they would talk. Sometimes they would just sit. And sometimes, when words were not enough and the silence needed to be gentle, Sumin would understand. He would put down his tools, open his arms, and offer a quiet, steadfast hug. A silent, ongoing conversation between two very different beings, proving that the most powerful force in the cold, vast universe was not always a dragon's fire, but sometimes a human's quiet compassion.